Hey folks, how's it going? Jovan Hutton Pulitzer here with you this evening. And I'm going to point out some of the hypocrisy, some of the weird stuff that's going on with getting to the bottom of this 2020 election and what exactly happened. I'm going to talk about a report. I'll post it where you can download it yourself. This particular report is a 43-page report that was released regarding election interference. And they're saying that nothing occurred at all in this election that had any way to do with anything hokey pokey at all. Now, I believe that you believe something was wrong. I want to remind you what I stand for. I'm going to play a video for you as everybody gets spooled up here. I want to remind you what I stand for and what I'm saying needs to happen with our election. But I'm going to call out the hypocrisy because the world uses the 2012 Russian presidential election as the standard for proving beyond a shadow of a doubt election fraud. The 2012 election in Russia is the standard for proving total election fraud from top to bottom. The problem is our election in 2020 has the same blueprint and the exact same problems. And I'm going to show you how they're hiding this in smoke and mirrors. And an article came out in Forbes about this bullshit report. I'm going to show you how they baffle you with numbers. But I want to remind you what I'm going for is I want to see the physical ballots. If this country was founded on a great piece of paper called the Declaration of Independence, then I believe that we should make sure that this country doesn't get undone because of a simple piece of paper called the ballot. That ballot you had in your hand when you marked it, whether you mailed it or went in, that is the historical document of what you intended to vote, what you intended to happen, and how you intended for this country to be run. That is why only that ballot matters. Get ready, share this, call your friends, tell them to tune in. I want to remind you what I look for in ballots, and then we'll get on with the program.
With mail-in ballots being the most contested part of this recent general election, let's take a look at the ballot as a simple piece of paper. Paper has memory. If a ballot was mailed, there will be folds throughout the paper. Physics say that once the paper is bent, it can never go back to its original shape. Our systems can detect this. While looking at the paper ballots through our systems, we're not only able to tell was the ballot actually folded and mailed, but we're also able to track did it go through the postal system and get accounted for. While looking at these ballots, we can look closely at the votes and we can tell whether the vote was cast by a human hand or a machine. The human hand marking the oval leaves telltale signs of human dynamics. However, if the oval was filled in by a machine, it looks totally different under computer vision examination. Besides, there should be no ballots with already filled in votes. These are just a few of the things that can be detected in the paper that is the ballot. And remember, the paper is a piece of code as well. If that paper is misprinted or misaligned, it will force the voting system to ask for adjudication. Adjudication means somebody, an administrator.
So, folks, I want to come back to the broadcast because I tried to protect you against fucking idiots like this MV Tits DWO. I'm doing my best to try to block it out of the broadcast here. I have no idea why I can't block this freaking idiot. Please, see this crap? Google Drive, you know what? Block it, scammer. I'm trying to get rid of it, can't get rid of it. And it's unfortunate that there are idiots out there that try to do that. But right now, I don't have control for some reason. StreamYard's having issues connecting with my destination. Just basically block that fucking idiot out. And by the way, you're a fucking idiot if you think that Pepsi is going to give you $1,900 for COVID fucking relief. Tell you what, you want to sell that shit? Go move to Ethiopia. Not here. Anyway, let's move on, because that's about as ignorant, right, of a pitch as we're getting pitched on this election, right? This little idiot who just came in trying to say that Pepsi's going to give you $750 relief, right? Yeah, for COVID relief for Pepsi. That kind of idiotic stooge who would come into a public forum and post this should be running for office here in the United States. Because I tell you what, that idiotic stooge would qualify to basically say, hey, this election is great and whatever. And I'm going to call this system out, because I don't like idiot stooges like that. Period. That is the stupidest crap in the world. And it is the stupidest crap in the world if you think there were no problems with this election. Okay? Period. So let's get right down to it. In 2012, the presidential election in Russia since then has been held out as the most corrupt presidential election of any country in the world. Period. Any country in the world. Okay? However, here's a report by the federal government I'm going to talk about that calls out that Russian election in 2012. Same with Uganda. And the problem is our election in 2020 mirrors what happened both in Russia and in Uganda. So let me show you how I got tipped in this story before I got pissed off at our Ethiopian brother there trying to sell us Pepsi COVID relief. So let's go here. Let's share my screen. I wish I had a button where I could let those idiots join in, right? Because I'd love to see some idiot in Ethiopia trying to sell that shit. Anyway, let's go. Okay, you ready for this? This is an article that just came out in Forbes magazine. Okay, let me see if I can pump it up for you. Okay, and you can read the headline for yourself. Okay, election 2020, February 19th, 2021, 8:03 Eastern Standard Time. 44,667 people have read this. And yes, I got the same blocking area trying to block that idiot, whatever it was. Anyway, okay. So you see this here? It basically says there was no evidence of election fraud in battleground states. Now, the reason they say there was no election fraud is she quotes a report called the MITRE Corporation Analysis of the 8 battleground states, blah, 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 that the presidential race wasn't stolen or fraudulent, even as former President Donald J. Trump and his allies continue to claim. So there you go. Top magazines. Forbes magazine. Lord knows I love Forbes magazine. Love Steve Forbes. Had a long-term relationship with them, right? But this story by this Allison Durkee, right, has no basis on fact, and they're trying to baffle you with bullshit called this report. So the first thing I want to do for you is I want to give you a peek at this report, okay? And in this report, what they attempt to do is push off to you, baffling you with numbers, okay? Baffling you with numbers that they did all this analysis and everything's perfect. So let's go look at their analysis, okay, that we have with this. So let me find it here. Let's see, what is going to be called? Data analytics. There you go. Ready? Boom. Here's the report. Okay, it's the MITRE, I don't care what you call it, but it's the data analytics to enhance election transparency. Now, basically, this report that you're seeing on my screen is done by their nonpartisan National Election Security Lab. Check this out. They're even so patriotic at their National Election Security Lab that their team, ready for this? Their team is called the Bald Eagle Team. The Bald Eagle Team. Right. Anyway, in this BS report of the Bald Eagle Team, they're basically saying they looked at everything from Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin with a focus on anomalies that have been held up by some in the GOP as potential evidence of fraud. Now, I like the way they word these things, right? Period. I like the way they word these things, okay? And it's really interesting how they use smoke and mirrors. And so I only have to go through the first 6 pages is kind of like the outline of this. It's really kind of impressive, right? Let me go to the outline. Let me see. Blah, 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 there. So you look at the outline of it, and they show all these things that they're going to do in these states. And so you're looking at all these states, Dominion Machines, Butler County, Pennsylvania. They have this thing. I like this term they use, the Fair Election Fingerprint. The Fair Election Fingerprint. That's their new statistical analysis. But as they baffle you with the BS of numbers, I'm going to decode geeky BS, and I'm going to let you kind of make your own decisions. So now if you look at this report, I'm just going to skim through this real quick. You see how they have really nice, and I'm going to see if I can pump it up for you because I want you to see it. They went to a lot of trouble to do nice reports. Okay, see these wonderful, beautiful charts and reports, and they use all these dots and they use these big words and everything else. Here's one of the things that stuck out to me in it at the very beginning of this report. Okay, basically what they say is they leverage data analytics to identify anomalies. Leverage data analytics to identify anomalies. Well, the very first thing these people said to all the data scientists looking at the numbers was, you can't look at statistical analysis. That's horseshit. That doesn't prove anything. Yet, in their own reports, they're leveraging data analytics to identify anomalies. Now, look at this. Now, where do they gather their information? They gather their information from election websites, state government-run agencies, right? And then they monitored, this is the kicker. This is the kicker. They monitored the media from October through the end of December to get a real take on what was really happening. So their scale to monitor this was the media. That's their analysis, right? That was their analysis, is to basically monitor the media. As we go back to these charts, and the one I'm going to focus on is I'm going to show you some Georgia stuff because I think you need to know it. So they chart it all out, and they use all kinds of interesting charts. They use a lot of interesting terms. They basically deny Benford's law, which is established one, and they come up with their new one, fingerprint for Georgia. And it basically said they did this, and they base it on a particular type of analytic, right, that their fingerprinting provides. Now, their particular fingerprint is by taking a Gaussian or normal distribution of 0. They use kurtosis, the measurement of weight of tails. By the way, if I was measuring some tail, I don't think I would use kurtosis. And I think if I was wanting to measure any type of tail, if I even suspected it had kurtosis, that's probably tail I want to stay away from. But anyway, wouldn't you? Let's go back to this. Okay, and so as we get into these analytics, and you're looking at it, they base all these nice little charts on, okay, here's the ratio and here's the math by when it, and here's the logarithm by which we did it. And it's a normal distribution, which is evenly distributed, although it's normally curved. However, to be fair, as long as we've got a negative 2.3 kurtosis, which is fine. But here's what I want to point out to you. The Russian presidential election of 2012, which is widely considered to have high levels of fraud. You see that on my screen? So that's what we're going to focus on. They basically said, you're right. Not for me to say has it right. If you have kurtosis and measuring the tail, that tail needs some antibiotics, right? Totally. That tail looks like it's got kurtosis. Yes. So let's stay away from tail with kurtosis, right? Okay. So that's some pretty nasty stuff if the tail has kurtosis. Anyway, so we got this report, and now we're just going to dive into it. They basically said in this report that there are no anomalies. I'm going to do the low-hanging fruit for you first. And then they said Russia is the standard for proving, okay, that fraud occurred. Here we go. So I'm diving into this report. I'll post it for you so you can go to it. But remember, they said, okay, we monitored the median from October to December 2020 to monitor any anomalies. And they say their data is basically from the pre-election information. Bald Eagle, and it wasn't me, Bald Eagle conducted analysis on data available on election day, including data related to early voting methods, and return and rejection rates of early ballots. So they say they go right up to election day. Now, you and us know that even in this media stuff going through December, all the facts were still coming out. You didn't even know all the facts. We didn't even know all the facts. And in January, the real numbers start coming down the pipe. But let's just say their method is perfect, and we're going to kind of let them do that, okay? And so I want to point out to you, they basically started looking at alleged ballot harvesting. Now, do you understand what ballot harvesting is? That basically means it is totally legal in some states. I think it's a scam. But if somebody doesn't use their ballot, you can go harvest their ballot like they grow on trees. Wait a minute. They do grow on trees. This last year, they grew everywhere, right? And so they can harvest a ballot. And if you don't use the ballot, then they can let somebody else use the ballot in your name. How in the hell is that legal? How in the hell is that legal? But it's legal. But let's look at where they did some of the ballot harvesting. And what I want to point out to you is their keywords, right? And here's their keywords right there. I don't know if you can see that. It says, revealed each address had a plausible reason for receiving multiple ballots. So the first thing I looked at in their report is, okay, what they call multiple ballots is if there were 20 or more ballots that went to one location, was there a reason for said ballots to plausibly be there? Okay. Now I'm going to open my screen because I want you to follow on the math. Give me 1 minute because I want you to see if you can just follow me in what I'm going to show you here. When we look at the math, these politicians want us to accept as the true, real, and accurate math, okay? So take a look at this. So let me go to my screen here, and I'm going to share with you my calculus later screen, okay? And so I'm on my calculator here on DuckDuckGo. Okay? So in Georgia, there's about a 10,000 vote spread in declaring the winner either being Donald Trump or being Joe Biden. I'm rounding these out. Just hang on with me. 10,000 votes. It's what it's down to right now. Now in Georgia, there are 2,300 voting locations. Okay, 2,300 voting locations. That basically means that there is per place to vote only a 4.3 difference in the ballots. So four individual ballots and one basically torn into a third. That's the number. So you following with me so far? That's how close this thing is in Georgia. And that's why this next number I'm going to share for you in the report. That's why it matters. See, it's not about big mass scale, because as you saw right there, to win this particular election, all you needed in Georgia was 4.38 votes per voting place. That's it. That's what this comes down to. Okay, so that's the magic number. But here's a few things that they pointed out. They basically got called out and they said this was fraud. And some of the things that were called out was, look, you had ballot harvesting all over the place. You had addresses that were used as people's addresses that weren't really addresses for people. But this particular report says there's all a valid reason why those had multiple addresses. So let's take a look at this. One of them was a college dorm in Albany State. Now, you're supposed to use your legal address. That is basically the numbers you, in order to vote, you must register at your home address, not a college dorm address. It's not accepted, but we're going to say okay on that. Then there were other ones to a senior center. Now, again, senior centers couldn't get out, and people went and canvassed the senior centers, said, hey, you going to vote? And they go, no, can I have your ballot? They took the ballot. I still think that's nefarious, but quote unquote, it's allowed. But let's just look at it by categories, right? The categories are of these multiple addresses are apartments. Well, that stands to reason. Everybody has the same address at apartment complex. The only interesting integers, numbers in there are the fact you have different apartments. Oh, I can accept that one. And then there's one in here that was a boarding school. I actually looked at the boarding school. It was the Darlington Boarding School. I actually looked it up. And I looked at, and they're only K through 12. So that disqualifies it right away. None of these kids should be voting because they're not old enough. But it is a boarding school, and about 30% of their staff literally lives on the campus. I looked up all of their staff, did the math, and come to find out those numbers are right. But then there's a next category. The biggest categories of this were healthcare facilities. How does somebody live at a healthcare facility? How is your voting address a healthcare facility? Now, see, this report justifies there's a plausible reason that somebody could live there. Now, I can't think of a reason why you live at a healthcare facility. I also can't find a reason why you live at the temporary homeless shelter, which is another one in here, right? Temporary homeless shelter. Look at that one, jails. You can't vote. You're incarcerated, convicted, or whatever the case may be. But a lot of these addresses were jails. By the way, M. Ball said nursing home. You're right. But see, it has its own category right there. So healthcare is not a nursing home. It has a separate category for it right there. I understand that one. Hell, it even shows a monastery and an RV park. I even get that. But how do you have jails, homeless shelters, right? Temporary homeless shelters at that, and just generic healthcare facilities? How do you justify that? And so that's what made me first dig quite a bit deeper into this story, right? Of, hey, what should we look at these numbers? Because they say there's a plausible reason for receiving multiple ballots. Now, they don't say what it is, not at all. They don't say what it is. So let's go look at this. Okay, so let's look at their Kurtosis model. Okay, and so this is where the numbers get really, really interesting. So I'm going to show you the state's real numbers, the federal government's real numbers. And then remember I said this particular report says the standard globally for proving election fraud is the 2012 election, presidential election, right, in Russia. So let's take a look at these numbers. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to kind of single fire through them. So the first one that we're going to look at is voter turnout. Now, this is really important to understand what happens in these states. Now, you're looking right here, okay? This is Ballotpedia. This is basically the definitive source for looking up anything ballot turnout, okay? Now, try to remember these numbers. If you need to, go ahead and write them down, okay? Go ahead and write them down, because I'm going to refer back to these things, okay? And I want you to take a long, hard look at these numbers too, but write them down, because when I jump to the Russia stuff, you're either going to puke or you're going to shit your pants, right? Because this stuff is in your face. So if you look at these charts right here, it basically shows that the average turnout rates in the United States, based on percentages, you can look at it, right, is about 50%. There's some variables. In 2016, it was a 60% turnout. In 2014, 38%. But look over here at the opposite side of the numbers. The opposite side of the numbers basically shows where people vote for the highest office. This is vote by president. And basically, really simple is, a lot of people don't want to bother with that one. But the average turnout, you can clearly see, is in the high 50s when you do the averages. Now, this is where it gets really, really tricky. I'm talking about Georgia. I'm going to show you a report in Georgia. I showed you how Georgia can come down to any one place if just 4 1/3 ballots, that's all, 4 sheets of paper are wrong. We'll just call it 5. If 5 sheets of paper out of the thousands that precinct took are wrong, this election changes. But yet the state wants to accept a 1/3 of 1% audit. That's what they want you to accept, a 1/3 of 1%. Now, let's look at these numbers. And this is what's going to kind of wow you here. Let me stop sharing my screen. I gave you the voter turnout by US-wide. Now let's look at the voter turnout by state. Very important. Pay attention here. And the reason it's very important by state is because we're going to focus on Georgia. See my screen here, folks? This is actually the audited numbers. You can look at all this gobbly-goopity poop and you can get any state's average numbers. Okay? Let's kind of zoom down to where I zoomed down to Georgia. Okay? 56%, 35%, 62%, 40%, 59%, 38%, 59%, 55%. Okay? There's the numbers. You can look at them for yourself. You can audit them for yourself. The mean average when you look at Georgia's numbers is when Georgia gets over a weighted average of about 52%, you need to really hard look at it, because that's not their statistical average going back 20 years. Okay? So this report that I'm reading here and what I highlighted here is they actually basically point something out that I thought was really interesting. Now, you can get befuddled in the math, all kinds of befuddled in the math, okay? And basically what has to happen is in this map, they basically said, right here, see it? On average, 31% of the registered voters did not vote in the presidential election in Georgia. There it is right there. On average, 31% of the registered voters did not vote in the presidential election in Georgia. Their numbers, their facts, their reports, their standards. So if we were to take a look at that information, what would all these fancy charts with dots mean? Would they make these dots mean something else? Would these little dots on a paper mean something completely different if you actually understood how to reason them? Okay, Robert. Okay. Okay, if you want me to. Okay. Yes, you're right. Okay. 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 You ready? Okay. Anyway, let's go here. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And I'm sharing it here, sharing my screen here, going to my Chrome tab. Okay. Hey, okay. Anyway, bingo. Sharing my screen. Let me tell you what you're looking at, okay? See, this is all the okay data, okay? And I just want you to be okay with what I'm sharing with you, okay? So look at the chart over here. No, sorry, here, okay? And if you look at this chart and you read it, okay? All those dots, okay? Those are 279 dots, okay? And those 279 dots, okay? Those dots represent 279 counties. Okie dokie, right? Okie dokie, okay? And what you need to do is you need to understand how to understand those numbers, okay? So I'm going to tell you how to read these numbers, okay? Here you go. Pay attention, okay? Anyway, you're looking at this chart here. These are all these 279 dots that basically show where all the votes came in. They audited 6 counties in Georgia, which represented 279 precincts. These are the 279 precincts charted out. What you must understand first is they acknowledge an audited number in Georgia, okay, that 31% of the people did not vote, okay, in the presidential election. So we take 31% off the top. 31% off the top. So you got 100, you subtract 31%, 69% is all we should be dealing with. Okay? Let's go back and look at it. So if we're looking at these charts, we got to go, wait a minute. 69%. So look at this. If I drew a line right there at 69%, why are all these dots over there when they readily admitted, see, this is turnout. See at the bottom, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100%, right? They already acknowledged that 31% didn't vote. And so actually this chart looks like this in reality. So what they're saying is, if you take in the fact that 31% of the people didn't vote in the general election, then all of these dots should actually be over in the gray shaded areas. You get what I mean? Okay. Okay. So the dots should all be in the gray shaded areas. So if you're following with me right now, you're going, holy smokes. 70+% of those damn dots are above that 69% line. What the hell's going on? All righty then. So let's go back and let's look at this. Well, if it's not supposed to be over 69%, let's look at it this way. What if we move the gray area for the average turnout in the gray? That means there should only be 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll combine these as 5. There should be 5 precincts that out of 279. Now this is key, folks. Pay attention to the math. Okay? Is 5 out of 279 show the average that basically Georgia normally shows. So let's just accept, okay, that, oh, I said okay again, I'm sorry. Let's just accept that over that average turnout, we get here. And so even if I took in the highest rate Georgia's ever had, look at all the numbers that show up in this irregularity band. All of these dots instantly show as irregularities over the standard. When you take out the 31% that this actual report says didn't vote. Now you go over here to this one and you get to this various one here. Anything you see in the yellow, should not statistically exist based on their own data. But yet they tried to convince you this is the actual report and it doesn't prove anything because we use the structure of the substructure of the analytical structure combined with the structure multiplied by the Keynesian term by the Bayesian processor Star Trek 9 communicator formula that we created for fingerprinting boats. And they basically want to convince you that, hey, that's the real story right there. See, there's no fraud there. But when you audit it, when you actually look at their own numbers and they say 31% of the people didn't turn in, well, they can't explain over half of this. And then when you look at the real numbers based on the state and history, here's what history shows where they all should be. This is definitely an anomaly. And if you took the highest that actually they ever did, see this 72% up to 100%? See how over half of them are in there? That is what leaves the following to be determined. Now you understand the setup. Now that I've got the setup, let me get to the meat of the matter so you can debate this with your friends that do not wish to understand, do not want to understand, because this is how you win the argument. Even in this 43-page report put out by a government agency, funded by government agencies, funded by the current administration to prove there was no fraud, and they use all these fantastical terms, which most people don't do, and they use this and they put it out. But when you hold it against the real numbers, you see the numbers don't add up. And if you take and colorize the chart, so you're really looking at it in slices of a pie, not just the chart that they know you won't understand what you're looking at, that's where they get you. But here's the real meat of the matter. Get ready, folks. It's going to be a wild ride from here. Here we go. Let's go with the Washington Post first. Bing. There you go. This is a March 4th, 2012 report by the Washington Post. Now, we all know that the Washington Post don't love themselves anything conservative, and I'll be damned if they're ever going to publish anything that leads anything to conservative information. But here you go. They basically acknowledge that Putin wins election as Russian president, but opponents claim widespread fraud. Now, remember, this report said that Russia was the standard for widespread fraud. That is the standard they use in their own report. That here is how it went. Now, an interesting thing in the Russia election, right? They basically point out that in this election, if you read this article, you can find it. You start looking at these numbers, that you find out that they basically had activists, right here. I'm going to show you. I think I can pump it up for you. Let me do it this way. Thousands of Russians nationwide signed up to monitor the election Sunday. All-day activists reported instance after instance of multiple voting abuse, abuse of absentee ballots, and obstruction of observers. In the Russian election, which is held out as the worst, most corrupt election ever to be had, as reported by the Washington Post, and in a moment, we're going to go to the Los Angeles Times. They said thousands of people reported that there was overvoting of ballots, multiple ballots being counted multiple times, that there was widespread abuse of absentee ballots. That's basically mail-in ballots. Hey, look what we found. We got all these mail-in ballots. We had to count them. And that election observers there to confirm that the election was done legally were blocked from observing. Blocked from observing. I love this one little quote, right? And they talk about it as the Kremlin magic of what's going on. But everybody who was in this election and taking these numbers down in Russia and documenting this, every one of them basically said this is a prime example of fraud, election fraud, period. Now let's jump from the Washington Post to the Los Angeles Times. And let's just see if we can compare the sources and see what they basically said then. Blah, 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 Washington Post. Hang on, I'm just looking for it here. My screen's not showing up right. Let's hang on. There it is. So I got to close that. Bear with me one moment, guys. Don't need precincts. Don't need Arizona bill. Don't need that. Here you go. Okay. Now I can share my screen. Sorry, I had too many windows open. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Bing. Los Angeles Times. Now this is further after more digging into the phony, fraudulent election in Russia, presidential election. This was submitted September 24th, 2012 at 12 a.m. Basically, they said, they confirmed there was widespread ballot box stuffing. And they basically said, not only has it been certified, but this is widespread and it's as bad as Uganda. Even in this one, where this report, remember I mentioned earlier, I don't expect you to remember it, Benford's Law, that they basically said was trash. Well, look at this. On this particular one, they basically said that Benford's Law, right, is what looks for irregularities. So in 2012, it was great, but when it's used for anything for conservative, it's wrong. Here it is. Ready for this? In the model that they used to detect the fraud in the Russian election, they says if an election has areas that have extremely high voter turnout, anything pushing up closer to that 100% mark than it is, that turnout is most likely a fraud. And the way they determine it is, do they go over the norms? Is there a big bulk turnout for one candidate predominantly? Does that sound familiar? One candidate getting tons of votes at the last minute? Here it is. Even in the LA Times, they basically said the fix is lightly in. This is audited. This has been audited and studied over and over and over. They all mimic what goes on in Russia and Uganda. Russia and Uganda, where they basically said it is an incompetent election that benefits the few. Here it is. Writers, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, this report claiming that's the standard, and they baffle you with bullshit to tell you nothing happened when exactly the same things happened. Exactly the same things happen. Period. Exactly the same things happen. There you go, folks. You have the numbers. You can look at them yourself. You can look up this MITRE report. There it is. Paid for by the government. You don't have to look at irregularities and voting algorithms. You don't even have to look at dead people or any of that. All you have to do is look at the notorious trends in the worst presidential fraud in history, which every expert agrees was done in Russia in 2012. And you found out they ran ballots multiple, they stuffed ballot boxes, they put ballot boxes everywhere. They basically overflooded the market with mail-in ballots, and they would not let election observers actually watch up close. They kept them afar, taped up the windows, or intimidated them not to being there. There you go. There you go. This is what you must arm yourself with. These are the facts you need to know. I suggest you go back and watch it. I suggest you go read about the 2012 Russian election. Actually, I think they actually learned from that 2012 election in Russia how to do it here, and they did it. This is it. I appreciate all your support. Okay? I appreciate all your support. Okay, okay, okay. Thank you. Okay, okay. I love it. I'm just trying to get you the numbers, because if you can understand the numbers, then you can understand how to debate it with all the people that tell you nothing happened, that there was no fraud to see here. I don't have anything special over anyone else. I've decided to stop relying on some of these nefarious reports and just get to the facts. But our American voting system is broke. I'm a technology guy, and I would never, ever trust a damn machine again when it comes to voting. I wouldn't. It's not worth it. We have to get back to individual ballots that cannot be counterfeited. Let me give you an example of one of the smoke and mirror tactics they use. Did you know in these voting machines that if they take a blank ballot, nobody voted it, but it's a ballot, and they feed it into the machine, it just stores it over here? Did you know that? And it stores it as a legal vote asking, hey, what do I do with this? But you remember when our systems went down, we stopped counting? Well, you can go and look at voting, who voted, who was registered, who didn't show up. And did you know you can fill those in that got scanned in? I just showed you it only takes 5 ballots at any one place to change this election. 5. That's all it takes. 5 blank ballots in a machine can be voted later if you can look at the list of who didn't show up on your list and just put their names on it. But it was a voted earlier. These machines are designed for loopholes. If we're going to fix this, folks, it's just us. If you want justice, it's just us. It's not going to be up to politicians. It's going to be up to the American public to basically say, we don't trust these machines. If you listen to my podcast, I showed you how both the Netherlands, Ireland, and other ones says, we don't trust these machines. We have to get rid of these machines and systems. We have to get rid of these machines and systems, and we've got to go back to paper that cannot be hacked. And if there's a problem with your vote, it spits it out right then and makes you fix it right then and there, not holding it later for somebody else to decide what you intended. How can you get the states to reject the machine? Look at your states. Ohio, I think, is about to spend $180 million on some of these new machines that everybody's questioning. And it's right. If it happens again, it is our fault. Painless, you got it. If it happens again, it is our fault. Yes, Ohio just stopped it. And yes, Michael, I'm weird as shit, but that's the way it is. Okay? And take it from this weirdo, right? I'll keep fighting this battle until I find out how to make this never, ever, ever happen in our history again. Because if your vote doesn't count, America will fail. And if America fails, the world comes to mind, the world will fail. And I'm going to give Tracy the last word. And the last word of the day is, okay. See you later, folks. Love you. Bye-bye.